I've been playing the early access release of No Rest for the Wicked for about a year now, so with the recent drop of the dev's largest update yet, known as the Breach, I couldn't resist diving back in to let you know the good, the bad and the ugly. Is No Rest for the Wicked just isometric Dark Souls, or is it something else entirely? Let's find out, shall we? The year is 841 and ruler of the land, King Harold, has met his demise. The kingdom's control is handed to Harold's spite-filled son Magnus, and to add to the misery of the nation's people, a dark plague known as the Pestilence is spreading across the world, turning all who are infected into violent, mindless husks. You play as a Serim, one of an ancient tribe of warriors who historically fight the Pestilence when it arises. You're called to investigate the outbreak, starting in the small backwater isle of Sakra. While en route, a bunch of rebels known as the Ryzen, a group fighting for Sakra's independence from the mainland, attack the ship and ultimately sink it. Washed ashore, unarmed and wearing nothing but threads, you find yourself caught up in a vast political struggle and fight for survival as the pestilence takes hold. The devs over at Moon Studio have done a lovely bit of world building here. The story is an intriguing one. You have a well fleshed out political and religious system with all the tradition and structure that brings, set against a backdrop of an island forgotten by the mainland and struggling to survive. As you progress through the story, each character's motivations becomes more blurry, and the separation between the poor citizens of Sakra and their overlords on the mainland become wider. The personal relationships between some of the cast become strained, and a nice human angle to the story develops. The story provides a nice framework on which the game hangs, and it's a bit more structured and filled out than other games in the Soulslike genre, but it does still have that decent amount of environmental storytelling to complement the plot. The good writing and the well developed characters help add life to this dark, foreboding world, and I found myself wanting to see where this tale would take me next.
You are anything but predictable, Serim.
The visuals in No Rest for the Wicked are nothing short of stunning. Of course, I wouldn't expect anything less from the team behind the Ori games. Some real care has been taken to fill the game with intricately detailed handcrafted assets. Whether it's a rundown shack, a tree, or the entire city of Sacrament, the game is a visual feast. The experience is almost tactile. You can more or less feel the rough surfaces of the cobbled streets penetrating your ragged shoes. The texture work is fantastic. Light and shadows are used heavily throughout the game with a great deal of success. The game oozes atmosphere. One moment you can be plunging the depths of a cave with barely enough light to see 10 feet in front of you, palms sweating, wondering what is lurking in the shadows, and the next you might be climbing atop one of the game's many scalable walls and be greeted with a stunning sun-drenched vista rolling into the distance. The game's characters are portrayed in a stylised way. Limbs are oversized and faces have exaggerated features. It's a style that makes the game's cast instantly recognisable, and they fit in this dark, uncompromising world perfectly. Animations are nice. Our Serim hero moves around confidently and fluidly, from combat dodge rolls to casually strolling. Everything is smooth and purposeful. Enemies have got the same level of care too, from their reckless charging to the regret-filled ragdolling when they're defeated. Sadly, with this level of graphical fidelity comes some issues with performance. The game has come a long way on this front from its first release, but there are a few annoying jitters still. When swapping from one area to another, I get a very pronounced stutter, and occasionally I get a jolt or two when in combat with multiple foes. Although I have to say the stutters in combat are rare, the dips when travelling between areas is not. It's predictable and happens on pretty much all transitions to a new place. I haven't found the performance issues to be a deal breaker, but I would love to see Moon really dialing this in for the game's 1.0 release. The art direction is up there with some of the best the games industry has to offer. Its stunning mix of stylised characters and dark fantastical locales make for a jaw-dropping setting. However, some remaining performance issues do prevent a perfect score. No Rest for the Wicked scores 24 out of 25 for graphics.
But I'll save her. Protect her. From you.
No Rest for the Wicked is a difficult game to slot into any particular genre. Yes, it has the trademark Souls-like combat and difficulty level, but its heavy survival, crafting and building systems mixed in with a little roguelite action elevate it above being just another Souls-like wannabe. The game takes place on a series of interconnected levels, scattered with the obligatory Souls-like shortcuts to open. These levels are joined together by the city of Sacrament that acts as a hub area. Actually, calling Sacrament a hub area is probably doing it a disservice. It's more like a level in itself. After arriving in Sacrament and having a wander around, you'll find a host of vendors and NPCs. The vendors have a set inventory of stock aligning with their speciality. So far, so standard. But after a short visit to Maker Danos, you realise there's more to Sacrament than meets the eye. Danos is a man on a mission, and that mission is to rebuild Sacrament, or more to the point, he's going to get you to rebuild Sacrament. His to-do list comes with a host of materials, and it's up to you to venture out into the wider world, collecting wood, metal ores and a whole heap of other bits and bobs to rejuvenate the city. Of course, there's no stick without some carrot, and once you begin to improve things for the citizens and particularly the vendors, they start to bring in new inventory and offer better services. For example, Fillmore's smithing shack will let you make a small selection of weapons and use the furnace to smelt your metal ores into more useful ingots. These items take real world time to process, but after upgrading his premises a bit, these process timings are shortened and he gains more weapons for sale. Happy days. If you look around online, you'll probably see that this mechanic is a little divisive. Having to wait a real period of time for a game to complete something is not everyone's idea of good times. Personally, I like the system. I like the anticipation of what's changed, what new weapons or upgrades are going to open up. Maybe I'm just a sucker for delayed gratification. Can I see why some people don't like this system? Sure. If you're pressed for time and you want to squeeze in some gaming when you can, then facing a wait that may be longer than your gaming session is not going to fill you with delight. Discussions about timing things aside, the crafting and building systems are really robust. You can even buy a house or two and furnish them, although my house is more like a workshop stuffed with crafting benches and furnaces. The cycle of gathering materials to pump into improving the city and the vendor's stock is an addictive one. It's one of the aspects of the game that gives it an almost roguelite element, the other being each area's danger level, which increases as you get more powerful. It's affected by where you are in the story, your level and gear, etc. As danger levels increase, areas will subtly change, introducing tougher enemies and changing the location of chests and collectibles. It's a neat way of freshening up areas you have already dipped into. With greater difficulty comes greater rewards. The gear you pick up off downed enemies is more likely to be higher level, and the same goes for chests. The recently released Breach update has introduced a couple of brand new locations to explore and has fleshed out some of the existing ones. The new areas are Marine Woods and the Lowland Meadows. Both areas have added a substantial amount of content. The areas are pretty big and come with new enemy types, materials to collect, NPCs and bosses. I had a great time exploring these gorgeous new additions. If you think the game looked great before, you haven't seen anything yet. The level design on display here is excellent. There's a ton of stuff to see and do in all the game's areas. You don't have to go far before seeing something that catches your attention. Another improvement in the levels introduced in the Breach update is enemy placement. The devs have now removed the ability for off-screen enemies to attack before they're seen, which was a pain point exacerbated by the game's isometric viewpoint, so that's a nice adjustment to see. One thing that hasn't changed is the fast travel system. Resting at a Serin Whisper allows you to travel back to Sacrament or from Sacrament to the last Whisper rested at. I do wish the devs would update this system so you can travel to each Whisper you've opened, but for time being, if you want to visit an area, you'll have to travel back on foot. Of course, no self-respecting Souls-like would be anything without some tight, challenging combat, and No Rest for the Wicked is nearly there. The majority of the 150 hours I've spent in this early access release I've played with a melee build, and the vast majority of the time I've had good fun in combat. Hitboxes are pretty fair, enemies have some nice variation and cunning attack patterns that can catch you off guard, and the majority of weapons available feel pretty good to use and hit with a decent weight. Weapon deterioration is not overly aggressive, and I found myself pretty much ignoring repair powders and just headed to the smithy for a cheap repair job on my weapons and tools. There are a couple of small issues with combat though. Firstly, there's the stamina system. You start with a tiny pool of stamina which quickly runs out when swinging your weapon, taking damage or dodge rolling. The problem lies not so much in managing your stamina expenditure, that's a typical expectation for this kind of game, but rather the speed at which it recovers. One too many times I found myself out of stamina and unable to respond at all. I couldn't roll, I couldn't strike, all I could do was take hits, which was not fun. I had to ponderously walk around until the stamina bar refilled, which sometimes feels excessively long. Of course this leads to death and can feel unfair. Dying due to a skill issue is one thing, dying because you simply can't respond to anything is just frustrating. However, you can offset this somewhat by putting some more points into stamina or finding gear that enhances it, but I do feel there's scope there for a bit more balancing to be done. Another aspect of combat that feels a little underdeveloped at the moment is parrying. Many times I attempted, many times I failed. Could be a me issue for sure, but the timing seemed to be inconsistent, and after a while I just stopped trying and relied more on dodge rolling. The other staple of Souls-like combat, backstabbing, is a bit easier to get to grips with. Timing your rolls to get around enemies and backstabbing actually became a part of my arsenal as I became more used to the distance I needed to roll around to get their back. It takes a bit of practice and the window of opportunity to pull off backstabs is small, but it's super satisfying when you do though. The Breach update also introduced some new weapon types to play with, wands and gauntlets. Wands all come with a couple of runes to perform some magic attacks and can be quite devastating when scaled with their favoured attribute. No Rest also does its own thing when it comes to magic. Instead of a dedicated magic bar, you use the focus bar, which doubles as a source of magic when you play as a caster and also acts as the main resource for rune attacks when you're a melee character. Rather than filling up the focus bar from an item or food, it gets replenished when you hit. Now, I don't know if I imagined this, but pre the Breach patch I could have sworn I found items that would passively replenish focus, so I didn't have to rely on combat to refill my meter. But since the Breach update I've found no such items. It may just be the luck of the draw. Let me know in the comments if you've been able to find something to refill your focus passively. Wands are a nice new addition and present you with some nice new ways to play. One wand I tried could spread fire as I ran, excellent for mob control. Gauntlets are lightning quick and allow you to strike multiple times and then get the hell out of there. They have some interesting runes available too from a new Sacrament NPC called Ilaria. These runes give your gauntlets some hand-to-hand combat moves and turn the game into a dark fantasy beat-em-up. Nice. I enjoyed my time playing with both these new combat styles, but I did find the level cap that has been imposed on this early access version of the game stunted the fun just a tiny bit. I am looking forward to when the cap is lifted and I can start making some OP builds. To counteract the cap, you can respec your character, but you have to reach a certain point in the Serim Crucible where you meet Seneschal, who can unlock the respec statue. I'll talk more on the Crucible in the value section. On the whole, combat is visceral, challenging and for the main part fun. A few pain points with stamina and parrying create some snags which prevent the combat from being as smooth as some of its highly regarded competitors. I am mindful that this game is still in early access and I'm quietly confident that the combat, once fully honed, will be something special come full release. To aid in your fight against the pestilence and the tyranny of the mainland, you can level up your Serim using XP collected from defeating enemies and completing quests. Once you hit the required amount of XP, you get given 3 points that you can augment your stats with. Like a lot of games of this nature, certain weapons scale with certain stats. It's a solid, tried and tested system that works well. As well as powering up your Serim, you can of course upgrade your weapons too. Most weapons will have at least one slot where you can add the gems you find scattered about the levels to add enhancements. On top of that, you can also add special moves and utilities to your weapons in the form of runes. You can create a dizzying amount of weapon setups this way. Unlike a lot of its peers, No Rest doesn't let you regain your health with a charge from a refillable item like Dark Souls Estus Flask. Instead, you find recipes, collect ingredients and cook food, more like a pared down cooking system from Breath of the Wild. The recipes you find restore differing amounts of health, and some require a different cooking method, either at a fire pit or on a stove. I quite like this system, as the amount of healing items you can carry is only limited by inventory space and your desire to harvest the ingredients, of course. To prevent this system being abused, the devs have introduced a hunger limit, which prevents you from using excessive amounts of food during boss fights. This hunger level can be extended by using some of the blood ichor you get from defeating bosses and some of the larger targets given to you in challenges. Blood ichor is another upgrade currency that is exchanged with the Watcher to upgrade your inventory slots. The gameplay in No Rest for the Wicked is deep. There's a ton of stuff to get to grips with, and it's executed with a stunning attention to detail. The crafting system is comprehensive, the level design is engaging and makes exploration fun and rewarding, and in its early access release, combat is probably about 95% there. It's evident that Moon Studios are trying to do this right. The Soulslike and ARPG market is a tough nut to crack. Many have tried and many have failed, but I can't help but feel No Rest for the Wicked is shaping up to be something special. Gameplay scores 23 out of 25.
My outfit encountered a group of raiders as we came ashore on your coast. We sent all of them to rejoin God, save one. I thought she might be of particular interest to you.
The sound design here is really good. Every swing of a sword, every crunch of boot on gravel, every distant howl, it all adds layers to the atmosphere. The world sounds lived in. The soundtrack by Gareth Coker brings a subtle but powerful energy to the game. Instead of bombastic, epic fantasy music, you get these brooding, melancholic pieces that rise and fall with the tension. It's a real nice piece of sound design and complements the game brilliantly. Voice acting is also very solid. It helps that the writing is good, but each part is played well. From the most minor characters to the main pillars, the voice performances are passionate and convincingly sell the story. Standouts for me are Odessa and Ellsworth. Odessa is a young woman still showing some petulant and naive tendencies, but having to grow up rapidly due to the circumstances she finds herself in, while her father Ellsworth tries to hide his frustration at his wayward daughter while trying to protect Sacrament from the pestilence and interference from the mainland. It's an accomplished bit of acting from both performers. Another performance worth a mention is Madrigal Celine, her stoic and spiteful outer shell cracking at times, revealing a person at odds with her duty and her emotions. The whole sound package is excellent and scores 24 out of 25.
Welcome to Sacrament.
Being in early access, No Rest for the Wicked is of course not finished yet, so value above all else is probably the most difficult section to score, but I'm happy to say even in the game's current state of completion, its value proposition is still pretty good. The main campaign is fairly fleshed out already. The missions that are here are involved and present a stiff challenge, so you won't be sailing through them in a matter of minutes. Aside from the main story, you've also got a chunk of stuff to do in Sacrament. Upgrading the vendors, improving infrastructure, and buying and decorating your own home can become a cosy game in itself. Think Animal Crossing with blood and guts. Add to that, you also have the Serim Crucible, an arena challenge of sorts where you're thrown into randomly generated rooms chock full of enemies that you have to fight your way through in order to progress to the next. While you're in the Crucible, you meet Seneschal, an NPC who you can buy all sorts of upgrades from using the currency you actually collect in the Crucible. It all ends with a big old boss battle, which is no joke, so come prepared. Once you've completed the main campaign, the game then throws you into a post-game where certain areas become infected with the pestilence and you have to battle your way through these areas, clearing all the nasties before facing off against a boss. These new pestilence-soaked enemies are no pushovers, and as a consequence they drop some really useful weapons and ingredients that weren't open to you before. Some of this stuff you'll need to fully upgrade weapons, and some of it is just superior versions of what you already have. Some of the new items you pick up can also exalt your gear with the Watcher. You can unlock more power in the gems you've slotted into your weapons, armour and rings. And if that little lot is still not enough for you, you can also spin up a new instance of the game and take your character into it right from the start, or create a new character and specialise in different skills, all while keeping your other instances untouched. It's a great way of experimenting with different builds. No Rest for the Wicked already gives you a healthy chunk of content in this early access release, with more to come and at a very reasonable price point. Value scores 22 out of 25. No Rest for the Wicked isn't trying to please everybody. It's slow, it's weighty, it asks you to be patient and really live in its world. It's a gorgeous, atmospheric, challenging roleplay game that rewards exploration and careful play. There are definitely some rough edges, especially around performance and some aspects of combat, but even in its current form, this feels like something special. If you're looking for a flashy, high-speed power fantasy, this probably isn't your game, but if you want to sink into a dark, beautifully broken world and earn every victory, this might be one of the best experiences you'll have this year. No Rest for the Wicked scores 93 out of 100.
Tell them, Saddam, I honoured our deal, and an hero deserves an hero's pardon.
Sacrament doesn't bargain with murderers. You're headed for hard labor at the Mountain Gate, by order of the Madrigal.
You shit-smiling bastard!